And in addition to our core team of folks here that have introduced themselves, we also work very closely with our federal regulatory agencies. And so there's a representative from FDA, Dr. Evdokimov, that we work with very closely, from APHIS, Dr. Hedge, and from EPA, Dr. Carl Welch as well. So they're also very instrumental in our program. So today in this webinar, we're going to talk briefly about just NIFA's programs in general, and then specifically focus on the BRAG program with a quick overview of the kind of foundation and priorities of the program. And then Kari is going to talk about the details and the request for applications. Frank will talk a little bit about the proposal process, and I think Summer will wrap up here with some additional information and resources. So I will kick it off with the NIFA overview. Next slide, please. I guess you can go to next slide, I think, right? So the NIFA overview. So NIFA is the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. It is the extramural science funding agency within USDA's research, education, and economics mission area. And so basically what that means is we don't do specifically research ourselves, but we fund many of you who I presume are on this call today to do scientific research and related to agriculture. So we invest in and support initiatives that ensure the long-term viability of agriculture. And we provide funding and strategic leadership for programs that ensure groundbreaking discoveries in agricultural related sciences and technologies that reach people who can put them into practice. So NIFA itself covers a wide range of areas under the umbrella of agriculture that include advanced technologies like biotechnology and like animal breeding, business and economy programs. We've got a whole institute that focuses on natural resource programs. We have education programs, environment programs, farming and ranching, human sciences, food science, food nutrition and security, even a little bit of international engagement, and where many of us are housed in the plants area focused on production, protection, breeding, and management, plant health. Next slide, please. So we'll talk very specifically about the BRAG program now, and very specifically about the 2023 RFA, which has been recently released. The priorities, purpose and priorities for the BRAG program can be found in the RFA, page 6. You'll see that highlighted on a number of these slides as we go through, where you can find more information in the RFA. The purpose of the BRAG program. So the BRAG program has been around since about the mid-90s when it was originally authorized, and its purpose has stayed basically the same, and that is to support the generation of new information that will assist federal regulatory agencies, so again, the APHIS, EPA, FDA, in making science-based decisions about the environmental effects of introducing genetically engineered organisms. And so we have a very kind of long and more detailed list of priorities in the RFA that kind of fall under these major headings here that I'll highlight here. And that includes management practices to minimize the environmental risk of genetically engineered organisms, methods to monitor and understand the dispersal of genetically engineered organisms, gene transfer between genetically engineered organisms and related wild and agricultural organisms, environmental effects of genetically engineered organisms relative to non-genetically engineered organisms in the context of agricultural systems. And then 5 is just sort of other relevant topics that support the needs of the federal regulatory agencies. Like I said, there's a long list of these in the RFA, and if you have any questions about the fit of your specific area or line of research, I encourage you to reach out to me or to any of our team here and just maybe run a one-pager by us or set up a meeting just to talk about what you have in mind, and we can discuss how that aligns or maybe doesn't align with the BRAG priorities. Next slide, please. The eligibility for the BRAG program includes any public or private research or educational institution or organization. Most businesses then wouldn't be eligible unless they're public or private research institutions. They must meet all the other requirements discussed in the RFA. Again, you can find that on page 16. Next slide, please. So we've been working hard to kind of clarify this language and make it a little more standard across the programs where we're able to do so in terms of how many applications can be submitted. And so for the BRAG program this year, FY23, there's no limit on the number of applications that eligible institutions can submit to this program as a lead institution. So if you have multiple PDs at your institution that want to submit to the BRAG program, we certainly welcome them to do so. However, duplicate submissions to BRAG or other NIFA programs during the same fiscal year are not allowed. So you can't submit, the same application to BRAG and then to animal breeding or something like that in the same fiscal year. Different submissions by the same PD to the BRAG program during the same fiscal year are allowed, but it is heavily discouraged because we know the time and effort that it takes to put together a good application. So we generally encourage folks to work on submitting the single best quality application that they can in terms of submitting to our program. Next slide, please. The types of projects that are funded by BRAG are specifically research projects. So we don't fund extension, we don't fund education or integrated projects, specifically fund research only. And the types of projects are standard research projects, which we'll see a little bit more in a second. And we also fund conference grants that are associated with biotechnology risk assessment. Thank you. So in terms of cost sharing for the BRAG program, there is no matching requirements for the BRAG program. So any letters of support with matching resources will not be factored into the review process as part of the evaluation criteria. Next slide. All right, so I think that's sort of the program overview, and I'll turn it over to Kari to talk about the specific details and documents that are be needed for your BRAG application.
Thanks, John. We wanted to highlight that this year, the max allowed for a research grant is up from 500,000 to 650,000. And you can find the RFA at this link here. And below that is a link to the BRAG program page. And on the BRAG program page, you will find a link to previously funded applicants, which applicants usually, previously funded awardees, and applicants usually find that particularly helpful. So I just wanted to mention that. Our LOI deadline, which is strongly encouraged but not required, is December 1st. This is submitted in a PDF format, maximum 2 pages to Summer, and her email is here. We usually get back after the deadline really quickly within 1 to 2 weeks if your LOI is a good fit for the program. The application deadline is 5 p.m. Eastern on January 19th. That's submitted through grants.gov, and I'll give a few more details about that shortly. The total funding for 2023, we estimate to be 5.5 million. That's an estimate right now. The program code is HX, which is important for some of the documents you need to upload for your application. Maximum funding for research award, as I already mentioned, is 650,000 and 50,000 for a conference. And in the past, our success rate has been 35 to 40%. That might go down with the increase in award size for research grants. There's several key documents for your application, including a summary or abstract, project narrative, bibliography or reference list, a data management plan, which I'm going to talk about in a second, as well as several other documents which are required. That is going to be listed in the RFA. And if you see the NIFA grants application guide, which is linked here, it will provide you with details on how to fill out those other documents that are required for your application. As far as the project narrative goes, we wanted to stress that that has to be within the 18-page limit. 12-point font and Times New Roman is what we request for that, and that includes all your text, figures, and tables. It's not going to be reviewed if it's over 18 pages, so please adhere to that. Within the project narrative, you're going to give an introduction of your project, rationale and significance, your objectives, experimental plan, and if you're requesting to be considered for a center of excellence, you have to state that within the page limits of the project narrative. If you are resubmitting your application, you do get an additional page to respond to prior reviewer comments. And additionally, you should talk about cooperation at your institution, any institutional involvement, as well as your timeline. Next slide. Oh, and I just wanted to quickly mention that if you have any questions about Center of Excellence criteria or the designation process, you can go to the NIFA Center of Excellence website. Next slide. Data management plan is up to 2 pages. So this should include details on your expected data type, data format, data storage and preservation, data sharing, protection, and public access to that data, and the roles and responsibilities for all those activities associated with your data. If you go to this website here, you will find additional details on the requirements, as well as frequently asked questions about data management plans. Your application is going to be submitted through grants.gov, as I already mentioned, and just to highlight again, this NIFA grants application guide is really helpful to fill out all your documents, so you can get to it through this link here. And everything that you upload to grants.gov needs to be in PDF format. Even though you may be able to upload something in Word, for example, you still need to use PDF format for us to review it. And don't use third-party PDF builders for creating your PDFs. And I think on to Frank.
Thank you, Dr. Paris. Let's go ahead with the proposal evaluation process, which pretty much follows the standard that NIFA uses for several of our programs here. So each proposal that's submitted to us after it gets screened for completeness, it will be assigned to at least 3 reviewers, and we make an effort to find reviewers that have expertise in the area that's covered. And on occasion, we have the discretion to using ad hoc reviewers in case we feel like the panelists do not cover adequately the expertise that's required to give your proposals a very good look. So each reviewer will work individually. Up to this point, the panel composition is kept secret. So each reviewer does not know who the other reviewers are, and they're going to make their own evaluation on the proposal. They're going to look at strengths and weaknesses and other aspects. And they're going to provide NIFA with a written evaluation, which includes a score that we're going to use internally to help guide the process. Now, once a reviewer completes his review, their colleagues that have done the same have the discretion of going and reading those reviews. And so when the panel meets on the assigned day, they're already familiar with what their colleagues have done. And that's a point where a discussion is made. Sometimes people have different readings on the project, and that's not necessarily bad. So the panelists will thoroughly discuss this and try to come to a consensus of where this proposal should be ranked, what should be its rating on what we call a ranking board, which is really when we start comparing proposals to each other and try to figure out where they belong in our list. Next slide, please. So the evaluation criteria, I mean, the guiding document is the RFA. So you go to page 23, it's spelled out very clearly there what the evaluation criteria are. But in a nutshell, the reviewers are going to be looking for the scientific merit in the proposal. I mean, this is a science-based project program, and so all the proposals should have hypothesis, and also if the personnel that are doing are qualified to do this specific type of work. Might have some really good scientists that are a little out of their area of expertise. So this is one of the criteria that's used. It's evaluating if there's a good match of the people that are going to be doing the project to what's being proposed. Obviously, there's going to be a need for facilities for most of the proposals, and also we want to make sure that those facilities are in place. If they're not at the institution of the project director, that there are agreements with other institutions or companies or universities that agree to lend their facilities or to collaborate and allow the PD to use their facilities to do a portion or most of the work. Also, one of the key things in this program, probably what makes it stand apart from other programs at NIFA, is that we're trying to help regulatory agencies, and biotechnology is one of the main drivers of uncertainty. And so the regulatory agencies will use the results of the research to help them, make good decisions on allowing or disallowing certain biotechnologies to be used for commercial purposes. Now, as I said in the beginning, the RFA is what commands everything. So please review it carefully, and there will be more information there, especially when it comes to conference proposals, which have a slightly different purpose. So you can find the information in there as well, also starting on page 23. Next slide, please, Summer. We try to move these as fast as possible, but not faster. Try to get a result out in as little time as humanly possible, but also without sacrificing the quality of the process. So it takes a couple of months that are allowed for the proposals to be sent in after the RFA is released. And then we like to give the reviewers at least 5 or 6 weeks to look into those. There's some previous, some time ahead of that where we need to screen the proposals internally. They need to be transferred from grants.gov to us. And then, just some other steps, internal steps, try to make sure that we find a date that's agreeable to everybody. And as soon as all that's done, that whole thing should take 2 or 3 months at the most. And then there's, after that, we start processing the award. So we notify the awardees, or the people that have been recommended for an award, to be more exact. Also notify the ones that were not recommended for award. And then we make sure that the funds are available and released, and that we get all our other colleagues in the awards management division doing their portion of the work. So we'll say 3 to 5 months would be an average from the proposal due date all the way to the awards being made to an institution. And we try to keep everybody posted as how things are going. On the other hand, we appreciate your patience as we try to expedite things as much as possible, but without sacrificing the quality of the reviews. Next slide, Summer, and I think that may be you already.
Yes, thank you, Frank. Kari already mentioned that you can go to the program page and find a link to previously funded applications. And this link that's on this slide will go directly to CRIS, which is a database of previously funded applications and their summaries. So you can click on this link directly and just learn more about what's been funded through the program in the past. We also have other resources on upcoming events available on our website. The NIFA events calendar has upcoming deadlines, meetings, and webinars. And then the upcoming request for applications release calendar is also linked on this page. We have also put together a list of resources for you to access as you're developing your proposal. And I won't go through each of these, but basically they'll lead you to different opportunities, information on the grant making process and our review process, resources that are available to you as you're developing your proposal, and just other information, including just the direct link to CRIS, which is again that database for looking at previously funded applications. If you have any questions about the program, we will answer them live now. And if you have any in the future, you can always contact us using this contact information, and we will get back to you as soon as possible.
Great. Thank you, Summer. Yeah, so we've got a couple questions that have come in now. I think, again, there was a couple questions related to whether something might fit the BRAG program. And like I said, I generally encourage people to have a discussion one-on-one. This program is somewhat unique, as you see in the criteria that Frank talked about in terms of the scientific merit and scientific criteria, but then there's also the relevance to the regulatory agencies, and that's where we have to a lot of times have those discussions. And the regulatory agencies we work with them closely to develop the priorities, and they have input on all of that, and they also have feedback for our applications that are whether they're relevant to those agencies as well. So generally that works best to reach out to us and to discuss those with the team. Another question that came up was the purpose for the letters of intent. So what is the purpose of the letter of intent? So again, those are optional, but strongly encouraged. And the purpose for those is to basically help with that same question, determining fit for the program. And so we don't provide any feedback at that stage in terms of the project itself, other than whether this is something that would be a good fit for the program. Hopefully to save people the effort of going through the full proposal process, only to find out that it's not a good fit for the program. Sometimes we'll get projects that maybe are more strongly human health related or something like that, so we try to screen those projects out initially. All right, I think some of the links have been provided elsewhere as well. And so if you have any other questions, feel free. Okay, there's one here. Will a recording of this webinar be posted online? If so, when and where? The when is a little bit fluid. I think we have to get a closed caption, and so we'll work on doing that. I think the timeline's generally probably a weekish. I think we were talking about maybe 2 weeks, a week to 2 weeks. And once that's done, we'll post it on the program page website, which is provided on one of the slides earlier, and maybe Summer could drop that in the chat too, I guess, if you have it available, Summer.
The program page or the webinar page?
The program page, which I think has a link to the webinar page now too, so you can get to it from there. But I think I got some feedback that the recording didn't start at the beginning, so I'm not sure how we want to address that for the recording purposes. If we just want to, I think basically we just missed our introduction, so I don't know if we wanted to quickly do that again at the end, or whether we want to do that with those slides, Summer. But
either way. I'll go back.
AFRI Foundational Applied Science also has a genetically engineered GMO topic area, is what makes BRAG different. So I think, again, the makes BRAG different from probably some of our other programs, or perhaps from other agencies' programs, is this direct connection with the regulatory agencies, right? So it's an opportunity to maybe do some of that foundational work, but also connecting it to that risk assessment that's relevant to those regulatory agencies. And so I think that's probably the key difference. There may be some other differences in terms of what's eligible. So for example, this program is very broad in terms of work with animals, work with plants, work with microorganisms. Most of our other programs would probably be a little narrower in their focus, at least in any particular program. And so, this program, we work with all organisms, but with a very direct emphasis on the risk assessment of those organisms, and if those organisms were released to the environment. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that. Anybody? Okay. Okay, so the BRAG RFA provides a long list of research priorities, giving the small number of awards to be funded. Could you provide a narrower list of top priorities for the program? We try not to do that unless there is a very high priority coming from the funding agencies. That's something we hold discussion with the regulatory agency. Sorry, we hold discussions with them, and that's one of the things that we discuss. Is there something that is really a high priority this year? And if there's nothing that really rises to the top, then we don't have a specific list of projects or of those priorities that are listed that are a higher priority than others. Looks like Frank wants to weigh in there. What do you? Go ahead, Frank.
That's good. Thank you, John. Yeah, so I'll just trace a parallel with one other program that I help run that people call us and ask us, what's the disease of the month? Right. In animals, and there's really no, all these priorities are important. They're discussed with the regulatory agencies, and we don't have a wish list. They're all there. It's really project quality driven. So if you meet any of those, it will have a very good chance to be funded.
And that's again a good plug for the letter of intent stage, right? That'll help you. So if you're addressing a priority that's relevant to the regulatory agencies, that will help, we can help address that at that stage. And then, as Frank said, then the scientific merit and the other criteria that are discussed are then the second part of that process. So, and I think maybe while we're waiting, so I think Kari touched on a little bit in terms of the budget. The BRAG program is kind of unique, and she said, our budget's an estimate, which it is, because we, it changes a little bit every year based on the amount of biotechnology research that's done by the agencies. And I just wanted to point out that, NIFA helps to fund the BRAG program, but so does ARS, and so does the Forest Service. So that we thank them for their support of the program as well. And we have a question, are projects for 3 years max? I'm not sure what max means there, but no. I think we have the ability to go up to 5 years, I think, with extension. So we usually, I think most projects are not over 4 years in their initial requests. I think, trying to think what the RFA guidance is, but most projects are 3 years just based on history, but that's not limited as a max to 3 years. And then also to reiterate, I guess, what Kari mentioned, so just, that's a key thing this year that's changed from last year is the increase in award sizes for the research awards. We did that without, any increase in budget, based on some of the feedback we've received from previous investigators. And so we hope that will help to better fund the projects at least that are selected, but as she mentioned, that'll probably lead to 1 or 2 less projects that we'll be able to fund on a yearly basis. And one member of the team that we weren't able to introduce is our panel manager, and we haven't done that because they're not officially onboarded yet, but we have an excellent panel manager that will be serving with us this year that I look forward to working with as well. In the absence of a cost share requirement, how does one make a convincing case for institutional cooperation? I'm not sure exactly what's meant by that. I mean, by contributing external funds. Obviously, you can still do have cost share or cooperation. I'm not exactly sure what's asking. Maybe they can follow up with that question. And it says, our multi-PI projects allowed, one of them being international. Yeah, I think the same requirements are allowed there as long as you can make a sub-award as long as you meet the requirements of the sub-award. That is allowed.
If the person who asked the question about institutional cooperation wants to clarify with an additional question, we can follow up. And if anyone else wants to ask questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A box now.
Kari and I were just discussing this question just before we came on. So good. And that question is, are the letters of intent screened as they are received or all at the deadline? And so we usually do them all at the deadline. There's no rush to try and get it in a little bit early. It just makes it easier for us to all meet at one time. And then we try to do that very quickly after they do come in. So like she said, we try to turn them around within a week or so for sure to get back to people so they have time to move forward for the application deadline. The term of the slide was institutional commitment.
It's on the slide about the project narrative. And
Yes,
what
that
we
may
expect.
be making sure that other institutions, when they're going to participate, that they acknowledge that. Typically, a letter of support is sufficient if that's the case. You can't just say, "I'm going to do this in this lab that's in another place," and many people that don't even know you're going to do it. But just a simple letter saying that if they're not a PD already, then a co-PD, then a letter stating that yes, facilities will be available for this work. So we have these resources in place and they'll be used. I guess that may be what's being asked.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, what do you include in the application to indicate that cooperation? I guess is that something like, so yeah, letter of support in that case if it's not financial.
Yeah, what was on this slide was cooperation and institutional involvement, how you detail that within your project narrative. So just describing, and then if you have a letter of support, that would be great to add as well. And
I think I'll just plug Summer's slide again on the CRIS links is a very good way to see the projects that have been funded in the past too. So if you do have some kind of interests or that you're kind of wondering whether it may fit the program, I definitely talk with us and look at some of the previous projects that were funded as well. All right, not seeing any other questions coming in, so if you have any, let us know. Do you have something, Kari? No. All right, well, it looks like there's no other questions. So if that's the case, we don't need to keep people any longer. Like I said, this webinar will be available. And if you do have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to any of the team members. We usually are good at looping each other in to answer questions. And so we encourage you to do that as well. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. We'll see everybody later.